So welcome, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are, to this webinar. I'm Eugene. I am the CEO of Venngage. And today we have a webinar on how accessibility can supercharge your efforts. And joining me for this webinar is Granit Doshloku. He is the co-founder and chief strategy officer at Manferra, an award-winning SEO agency specializing in higher ed. So he has over 13 years of experience in SEO, including 7 years dedicated to higher ed SEO. So Granit is a recognized leader in crafting strategies that drive visibility, engagement, and most importantly, results. So this is a joint webinar from both Venngage and Manferra. So I'd like to welcome Granit to the webinar, and he's gonna get us started and kick off this webinar.
Thank you,
Go
Eugene.
ahead, Granit.
Super happy to be here. Thank you to everyone who made it to the webinar. Excited about this topic. This topic is a topic that I'm very passionate about. As Eugene mentioned, I've been doing SEO for some time. And when I think of SEO and SEO best practices, I think of not SEO best practices, I think of web best practices. SEO at its core is about building a great web, having great content that provides an answer or a solution to whatever someone in the search engine is searching for. And in doing that, you also have to provide a great user experience. You also have to provide great navigation. You have to provide a lot of things that are very, very similar to what accessibility is about. So this is what we are going to talk about today on how SEO and accessibility actually go hand in hand. Because SEO and accessibility, they both aim to make information easily discoverable and usable. When we think of accessibility, we think of practices that ensure everyone can access your content regardless of their abilities. And when we think of SEO, we think of strategies and tactics on how to make our content discoverable for search engines and for the users. And when we dive deeper and we look at what the goals of each kind of activity are, we'll see some common themes like usability, clarity, and relevance. So this is kind of some of the themes that we are going to talk about today. We have this Venn diagram here, which I think explains perfectly where these two meet. And it's like web accessibility, we're talking here inclusivity, we're talking usability, we're talking compliance. And what all those do is they make sure that you're providing a great user experience to a broader reach. And when we think of SEO, search engine optimization, we want our content, our site to be discovered by search engines. We want our site to rank on Google. We care about UX metrics like page on time, average page on time. We care about bounce rate. And those are user experience metrics. And those are important and ranking factors on Google. And by focusing on how to improve those, we're actually improving user experience. And by improving user experience, which is kind of like a factor on how Google values and ranks our sites, we're also making sure that our content, our site is presented to a broader reach. So we can see here UX and reach, I would say, are kind of like what gets these two activities together. And to be honest, I think we can all agree that making the web usable for everyone is just the right thing to do. And it's not just the right thing to do. It also has a strategic advantage because we'll see today that accessible sites, they also perform better in search rankings and user engagement. And that is good business. So it is good for everyone, and it is a business advantage that you have. And there are so many dual benefits to accessibility and SEO. Like, for example, inclusive websites create a better user experience for all the users. So inclusive websites equals better experience equals you'll get better SEO results. And when you have improved accessibility, that leads to better UX metrics, as we saw, time on site, bounce rate, leads to better SEO, better rankings. And it's kind of like when you look at Google guidelines and best practices, and when you start reading about how SEO works and what is SEO and how what the ranking factors are, you'll see that there is clear correlation, and Google is on the record saying that they prioritize accessible, user-friendly content in rankings. So there are so many other dual benefits of accessibility and SEO, and these are just some of them. And we'll talk about more in the next couple of slides. Like we can clearly see that there is a synergy between accessibility and SEO, and it just kind of like builds the business case for both channels. Like when you're thinking of like pushing accessibility, you can also use SEO as a selling point. And I'll leave it to Eugene to continue and talk a bit about accessibility, what is accessibility, and I'll cover the SEO fundamentals part of it. So Eugene, you want to talk about this a bit?
Sure. Thank you very much for that quick introduction on SEO and accessibility. So I'm going to just give a very high level overview of what web accessibility means. We're not going to dive very deeply into it, but at a very, very high level, right? Like digital. So we're talking about web, or sometimes called digital accessibility. Essentially, is a set of. It kind of bears down to a set of best practices. And there's also a set of standards governed by a set of policies called WCAG or WCAG. And it ensures that the websites are usable by people of all abilities. It covers a wide range of different, disabilities, including visual, auditory, physical, et cetera, et cetera. But the main goal is to remove barriers of access for everyone when they come onto your website, right? If you go into the next slide, so what are all the different parts of it? Without going into details, as I was mentioning, you can look in, you can Google this. I'm not going to go into all the details, but there is a bunch of guidelines by the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines called WCAG, in short form for it, that covers, at the very, very high level, four main principles of perceivability, operability, understandable, and robustness. So there's a whole bunch of rules that cover it. I'm not going to go into it because that would take up the whole webinar, but I'm just going to go over some very common, I would say, problems and mistakes most websites have. So, and we know this because there's an organization called WebAIM that runs a yearly survey. It's called the WebAIM Million Survey. They basically scan over 1 million of the top websites in the world and essentially look for web accessibility errors in those pages. And they come up with this report every year. So if you go into the next slide, like I'll just show you some of what some of the barriers or some of the accessibility issues are on most websites. The most common error is low contrast text. This is a very simple error. It essentially means that the colors you've picked for your text is really low contrast against the background. So, for example, if you look on the left, hopefully, unless you've got like really good eyesight, it's really hard to read the text "Happy Leap Day" because it's really light on sort of like this light kind of a background. But on the right, you can see that it's a lot clearer, right? So this is found in like 81% of homepages, making it difficult for readers with visual impairments to read the content on your site. This is the most common error found so far. Next slide. The other very common error is missing alt text or alternative text for images. So the way some people access the web is via screen readers, and this is sort of like assistive technology that essentially reads a voiceover. If you ever heard voiceover on your phone or on your computer, it basically just voices over the content. And for visual content like images, it relies on alternative text. And if you don't have the alternative text, essentially it's the screen reader or the user will not know what's in that image. And this is surprisingly still very, very still a mistake that's still really prominent on the web. Like with over 54% of home pages, not even like sub pages, home pages don't have alternative text for their images. Next slide. I'll go over a few more common errors. Missing form input labels is, I would say, one of the most problematic problems as well. So again, these are forms that are very common on any site, e-commerce, well, in this case, higher ed application forms. It's very, very common to create a form and then forget about labeling it correctly, forget about putting in, the proper HTML artifacts that screen readers require to understand that form. And that's detected by over, almost 50% of homepages, right? And then lastly, I'll go over one more common error is empty links. So, and these can be found on links that are usually on icons or images, where instead of actually having text on it, you have an icon of well, in this case, it's like a search bar, and there's no text associated with it. So a screen reader will not know what that link is for, and the user will have problems if they click on it. It's sort of like a surprise. What are they going to get? Right. So like I said, 45% of homepages don't have empty links, and that leads to a very confusing navigation for them. So these are just examples of the most common errors in web pages as far as accessibility is concerned. And these are some of the things that if you kind of help remediate and figure out and fix, it will also lead to better SEO. And I'm going to kind of move the conversation back to Granite. He's going to show you how to sort of address some of these problems and why they're important for SEO as well as accessibility.
Thank you, Eugene. Do you want to talk about the tools?
Yeah, I'll just talk about the tools. I forgot to talk about the tools. So the way you know how to, so how do you know, whether your website is good or not, right? Fortunately, there's lots of free tools out there that audits your website. I'll just give you two very popular examples. One is the Google Lighthouse, which if you're a web developer, it's available in your browser. You can kind of just run it as is. And there's an accessibility section, and it will give you those errors. It will tell you like, yeah, you're missing the alt text, you're missing, form labels and so forth. And then there's another tool called Wave as well, and you can put in the web address. There's even a browser extension. So there's lots of tools out there. These are just two of them that I would say these are probably the more popular ones that you can use, and they are freely available as well. And then, I think the next slide just shows an example of a website, and what the tool does. It actually goes in and looks at all these things. It looks at the buttons, the text, obviously, the modals, and then it prints out a report on what all the errors are. Right. So now I can actually move to Granite, and he can give you a little bit more details on how to address some of these issues and enhance both accessibility and SEO at the same time.
Amazing. Thank you. So let's start with the very basic question. What is SEO? SEO is about improving a website's visibility in search results. That is what's at the core of it. Usually the main goals are to attract more traffic, enhance user engagement, and obviously increase conversions. And when we think about how SEO works, how search engines works, and the whole ranking system and all that, if we want to simplify it, let's say we have like the input, which is like the keywords we're trying to optimize for, because we determined that our target audience is using those keywords to search for our products, services, content, etc. Content, which is obviously very important because in the end, the users are searching for content, information, questions, products, etc. But we also care about UX metrics because, I mean, it's on the record now. Google is having some legal issues with the government, and some documents surfaced that like they had like these internal presentations where they kind of like labeled themselves as we are stupid in terms of like we don't understand content. We say we understand content, but we don't. We actually understand clicks and we understand user engagement. So whenever someone is searching for something and they're clicking on a result, if they go in that page and stay for a few seconds and then come back, so they bounce back to the search results, Google is able to understand that user probably didn't find what they're looking for. So that result there didn't answer the search intent, what they were trying to find. And for Google, this is a big problem because like, their whole thing is about like we have the best results out there. And if they are sending users to sites that don't answer the search intent, to sites that don't provide the best content, the best user experience, then users will get frustrated and will start using Google less and less, and this impacts their bottom line. So UX metrics is actually very important in terms of like rankings and how Google understands what to rank in top results and what not. So you care about having a great website, user experience wise, uh, great content, because if not, that is going to hurt your rankings and your visibility. So yes, we have keywords, content, and UX metrics. That is very important. This is our input. The process is Google needs to identify the pages in our site. So they do that through a process called crawling, where they go on a page and then from that page they kind of like just crawling the whole site from all the pages. And this is where another thing from accessibility is important. So broken pages, broken links. This is important because if you have a lot of them, Google is going to probably miss out on some content, and they need to find all the pages that you have in order for them to index those pages, understand what those pages are about. So when someone searches, they start to showing you up. And when they show you up on search results, then you have higher rankings. This equals more traffic, and that kind of like helps you achieve your goals. So it's fair to say that search engines, and when we say search engines right now, even though there is a lot of things happening with AI, and we're all seeing that what ChatGPT, search, and Perplexity and some others are doing, the vast majority in the US, over 81%, in Europe, over 90% of the people still use Google as their default search engine. So Google equals search engine right now. That could change in the future, but for the moment, and they are prioritizing quality, relevance, and usability. So where do accessibility and SEO meet here? They meet at different things like structured content. This is very important for accessibility, but it's also very important for search engines because like structured content using headings in the proper way, that is very important because it allows Google to understand content better. We just said that they say they don't understand content, but they do, but not as advanced as we would like to think sometimes. Alt text is another thing. It helps for screen readers, but it also helps for your image search rankings. And what I mean by image search rankings, we all know Google and we search on Google, but like we also search in Google Images, and we don't think of that as a separate search engine, but it is a separate search engine. They have different factors, and alt text helps Google understand what those images are about and how to rank them. And mobile-friendly design, they're great for usability for our users and core web vital scores. So this is like some of the reasons where they meet. And what I'll do now is that I'll go in more detail on each of these key areas where accessibility and SEO intersect. So alt text and image optimization. Alt text describes images for visually impaired users who are using screen readers. It also provides context to search engines, and in this way, they are boosting your image search visibility. What you want to do and what you want to avoid when it comes to alt text is that you want to write concise and descriptive alt text, and you also want to focus on content relevance, and you want to avoid keyword stuff alt attributes, and you want to avoid using generic phrases like image of, etc., etc. Another thing that is very important is UX as an SEO signal. Accessible sites, they, if you are doing it right, they tend to reduce bounce rates by improving usability. And bounce rate, as we just talked about, is very important because higher bounce rate means people are not engaging with your content. They're going back to search results, and Google is going to demote your rankings as a result. Another thing when it comes to UX driving better SEO is clear navigation and call to actions. They keep users engaged longer. And when you have enhanced UX, that positively impacts your time on site, which is a key SEO ranking signal. So what you want to do here, some of the best practices would be you want to use logical hierarchical menus that work with keyboards and screen readers. And Eugene just shared some of the tools that can check if you're already doing that or if you need to improve that. You also want to design call to actions with clear and descriptive labels like buy now instead of like generic call to actions like click here. And then we have semantic HTML for better crawling. Here, we want to use semantic HTML tags like header, nav, main, footer to provide structure and meaning. It's important to understand that the better that search engines understand their site, the better they understand their content, the better our site is going to perform and our content is going to rank. So semantic HTML helps a lot with that because we can see here like there are some sections of the site like header and footer and navigation, and usually the sidebar aside here that they don't really change. So Google can understand, okay, this is the part on this specific page that I need to care about the most, which is like the article, because that is the unique page. But it's also great for software like readers because it helps them navigate through the content better. So it helps search engines and screen readers understand content better. And we want to use semantic HTML because, as we just said, it improves indexing for search engines, provides a clear framework for assistive technologies, and it enhances site performance and usability. Another thing that we care about is mobile accessibility and its SEO impact. Now, a couple of years ago, and it's been a few years now, Google switched from desktop first indexing to mobile first indexing. I'll share what this means. Up until a point, I think it was 2016 or 18, I could be very wrong, but it's been a long time. When Google was coming to your site to see what your site is about, what content do you have, they were emulating a desktop device. But since most of the people were already using mobile devices, but by that time when they made the switch, they decided to switch to mobile first indexing, which means when Google is coming today to your site to see how your site looks, how fast your site loads, what is the user experience, how the content is structured, and all these other things, they are emulating a smartphone device. They're looking at how your site looks on smartphone. And sometimes because we are working with our sites, usually on desktop devices, we're doing other fixes there. We tend to like just look, okay, our site is fast on desktop. It loads faster, navigation is great. But we forget to use it on mobile as often. And there we can see that maybe there are some areas that we can improve on. So you want to look at how your site is looking on mobile, and especially on something called Core Web Vitals, which are looking at things like load time, interactivity, and stability, and see how you're doing there, because these are important for SEO. And if you're doing accessible design, if you're implementing the best practices, you should be doing very well, because these are best practices when it comes to accessible design. And just to kind of like share that both SEO, search engines, and accessibility are on the same page, Google has a thing called search signals for page experience, where they have core web vitals, and they have things like they're looking at mobile friendliness. This is the site secure, so is it using HTTPS? Are they using intrusive interstitial ads? All of that. So they care about user experience, because they know that if you're not providing a good user experience, their users get frustrated, and they don't want to show sites ranking high in search results that frustrate users. And this is a win for accessibility, I think. So accessible mobile design best practices, what you want to do is you want to have responsive layout that adapt to different screen sizes. You also want to have text that can be resized without breaking layout. And you want to have button sizes that are large enough for easy tapping. So this brings us to the last one of the key areas that we wanted to talk about today, which is faster load times and their correlation to rankings. And there is a clear correlation on how fast the site loads to how well they do in search rankings. And it's not just about search rankings. User experience impacts all these different areas of a brand's digital presence. We see here on this kind of like on these stats that the probability of bounce rate increases a lot as the kind of like page load time increases as well. So accessibility first practices, they make sure that you're reducing excessive animations and bloated media files. And this leads to faster load times, which improve user experience and they improve SEO. And this is like just one of the things that, one of the many things how SEO and accessibility actually help and support each other. And there are so many other kind of like facts and research done on how the faster site has so many benefits from the conversion rate, not just rankings, all that. But for the sake of it, we'll keep to the bounce rate. But yeah, it's you want a fast site. And how to do that, there are different things that you can tackle. The simplest one would be to use lightweight images. And obviously, you want to use alt attributes. We just talked about why alt attributes are important. You want to minimize the use of autoplay features and heavy animations. They usually solve down the side the pages quite a bit. And optimizing CSS and JavaScript files for quick rendering, that always helps as well when it comes to improving your page speed across the site. So ultimately, what we're trying to do here, and with SEO and accessibility as well, is we want to build better websites for all the users. And this goes back to what I said in the beginning. Like, I think of SEO as best practices for building better websites. And better websites means better content, better user experience, and accessibility is at the core of all that. So key takeaways from my presentation, Eugene's presentation today, would be that accessibility boosts your SEO by improving user experience, site compliance, and structure. Aligning ethical practices with objectives, business objectives, it will create long-term benefits. And accessible, optimized websites are better for everyone, including here search engines. And what you can do next is you can start by just auditing your site for accessibility gaps. You can implement incremental improvements starting with alt text, semantic HTML, mobile accessibility, and you can start engaging stakeholders to prioritize accessibility and its impact on SEO. Now, one last thing that I wanted to share here today, I hope it will be helpful. As Eugene mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we as an agency, we do a lot of work with higher education institutions. And when we are revamping and optimizing the program pages, because obviously we want to help them. So when someone searches for their program pages, we want their program pages to rank better. We've created this SEO checklist, and some of the best practices here you'll see are also accessibility best practices. So if you comment here on the chat SEO checklist, the team will share this checklist with you, and you'll get that for free. And it's basically includes a lot of great tips on how to improve the program pages in your institution if you're working for an institution. If not, still, I think you're going to get a lot of value from this checklist, because it can apply to general pages as well, but it was built for SEO checklist. And I hope you'll find it helpful. And if you have specific questions on that, feel free to find me on LinkedIn and reach out, and I'd love to get back to you. And Eugene?
Yeah, we're going to take questions after this. So yeah, if you want, you can kind of put the questions in the chat, and we can answer those questions in a little bit. I just want to again go over a case study so that it's a little bit more concrete. This case study is a little different. It's not, it is about accessibility. It's about digital accessibility, but this is a specific case study on documents that are on the site. So I think we went, for the most part, this presentation is about your website. It is about web pages. But Venngage, in case some of you don't know what Venngage does, we are a design tool, and we are, easy to use design tool, very similar to Adobe or Canva, with a big difference in terms of accessibility. So the big difference is, if you care about accessibility, Venngage will actually allow you to create an accessible PDF or an accessible document, which means you don't have to remediate that document and spend like extra money or extra time doing it. So we are, in a nutshell, essentially embracing accessible design. We didn't talk about it. I think Granite mentioned accessible design in passing, and I just kind of want to, at a very high level, say, like, if you're curious about what accessible design means, it means that you are addressing accessibility upfront or being proactive with accessibility. Because the status quo, the traditional way of building websites and doing accessible documents, is to address it at the end. It's usually like the last thing people do. They build the website and then they go like, all right, let's pass it to the accessibility team or the compliance checkers to see if it's accessible or not. And usually it's too late. It's not too late. You can still fix the issues, but it's really late when you do that. And you're spending a lot more money and you're spending a lot more effort addressing the issues at the end. The best practice is usually to address accessibility in the design stage. That's why it's called accessible design, which means at the start of the whole process, before you even go in and change anything on your website, or before you design that document or that flyer or that annual report. So quick case study. This one's Colorado State University. It's one of our customers. They had a problem with accessibility. They had high remediation. So remediation means someone has to go in and fix an inaccessible document or page. So they had really high remediation requirement because everything was sort of done at the end, and they did not have a very collaborative system. Essentially, it was centralized. One team did everything. One team or a few people, the accessibility gurus, the gatekeepers, were doing all of that work. So whether it's a developer or someone creating these content, they would just kind of like throw it. They're like, I'm done. Now it's your turn. You fix all my problems. So the responsibility was not shared. And obviously, that is not an ideal situation. They kind of switched over to an accessible design. If you can go to the next slide, they switched over to an accessible design process, and they switched tools. So when you go over to accessible design, you do need a tool that actually allows you to use accessibility features that are built in. And Venngage has these features, and this is one of the testimonial from the assistant director of communications as an ever there. So we use Venngage for years, they were using Canva and they switched over to us, and they're now saving lots of time, lots of money, and they're compliant and their documents are a lot more accessible. So it's been a game changer for them. So the offer we have today for all webinar people, so all webinar attendees, is that we're offering free scanning of PDFs on your site. So if you have a site, whether it's for your, so if you're higher ed, whether it's for your program, for your unit, or for your college, we can scan your site and we can look at the PDFs, and that's free. So we can order, and we can give you a free trial of Venngage. So if you are interested in that, just comment PDF audit or just PDF, and then we will get in touch. And let's kind of go to the next slide. I think what we want to do now is, we can take some questions. So don't leave yet. Let's answer some questions. Anyone has any questions? So there is one question. Yes. So there's a question about the slides. We will send the slides out to everybody for sure. If any, we'll send it out to everyone. Are there any questions on SEO, or on anything on accessibility in general? You can type your questions in the chat and we can answer it. So we'll give everybody a couple of minutes.
Sorry about that. I'm a bit excited about the webinar.
Okay, so there is a question. Why is there so much focus on external websites versus internal employee websites? That's a good question. I think, so I'll answer it, and granted, you can answer. So I think it's as far as prioritization goes on like what to fix first or what to address first, but it's usually the public facing pages, websites that are given the priority. I think that's mainly, for SEO purposes, your internal sites are not, what's the word I'm trying, they're not indexed, or they're not, basically Google has no access to the internal sites. So from an SEO perspective, it's definitely external. And I also think from a accessibility point of view, the priority is usually given for external sites because you are serving, like the general public with your, there's a lot more, the impact is a lot higher on the external sites. But having said that, internal sites are also important from an accessibility point of view. I think the ADA regulations do also require, that your internal sites, especially if you have employees or staff or faculty who require them to be accessible.
Yeah, I agree 100% with Eugene. I think external websites, they just have a more broader reach, and that is why they are sort of kind of like have a higher priority when it comes. And like, to be honest, neither external or internal websites are doing that great. So the more impact will be to the external websites, but the way that I see, and from an SEO perspective, when we're doing SEO, for us, it's mostly like, there are a bit more commercial goals, which is like, how can we get visibility in front of our target audience so they can reach out, they can learn about what we have to offer and all that. And with accessibility helps in achieving that goal. And then just accessibility, I think the institutions who are taking this seriously, they're building best practices and they're building standards. They're using the standards not just for external but internal as well. And then I guess it's a bandwidth thing, so that could be as well.
Yeah, so we also have a question in the Q&A tab. I guess there's two, there's questions coming in both in and there's a question about WordPress. This is about, so I'm doing a presentation, so I'm going to read the question. Hopefully you don't mind. I'm doing a presentation to my local WordPress group on accessibility. What else do I need to tell them? This presentation has given me a lot to add to what I'm going to say. I can give a short answer to this, and then granted, you can, I don't know how much you know about WordPress. We use WordPress. So, on our site, we use WordPress for a blog. So I have some knowledge of WordPress and accessibility. There are some WordPress plugins that you can use to check for accessibility and for SEO. So I don't think they're the same. We use, different plugins for them. I unfortunately don't know them on top of my head now, what they're called. But if you search for them, they're on there. So my thought is that my very high level guidance there is that there are already, the testing tools that I mentioned, very similar versions are available on WordPress. And then from an SEO perspective, I remember now we use Surfer SEO. I think it's a WordPress plugin. We use Surfer SEO, like surfing. And they provide us with some SEO. They will test and flag all the SEO issues, like alt text and all of that, and hitting structure issues and all of that stuff as well. So, Granted, do you have any to add to that question?
Yeah, I mean, most of my knowledge to WordPress is from an SEO perspective, but I guess a platform like SEMrush or Ahrefs, which is kind of like if you're doing any SEO in-house or even working with a partner agency, you want to have an account there. They usually have a lot of great reports. They look into like broken pages, broken links, missing alt text and all that. So I would say like these platforms, they have some of this covered, but like to really do a great job, you have to look for specialty tools, I guess. And like for SEO on WordPress, we usually recommend using rank math. I don't think this is answering your question, but for accessibility, I would leave that to Eugene to answer because I don't think that I would be giving you the best tool
Okay.
there.
Right. So let's go on to the next question. Let's see. It sounds like, and okay, I guess this is more of a comment. It sounds like until a lawsuit happens, then they'll fix it. So unfortunately, that I would say,
Usually that
unfortunately,
does the trick.
yeah, unfortunately, that is kind of the status quo right now. Either if you're a higher ed institution, you either get sued or you get a complaint from the Office of Civil Rights, which handles the ADA regulations. That's from the Department of Education. An OCR complaint will prompt action. However, there are some progressive. There are, I would say, some universities that are more proactive. It is still a minority at the moment. So I will say, unfortunately, that is the reality that we face right now. There is new regulation coming out that will be enforcing a deadline, and the deadline's next year. They will be enforcing the ADA Title II, which is a lot of the digital accessibility stuff we just talked about. And that's coming in about like 2026. So I think when that happens, before that happens, a lot of higher ed institutions, especially the public ones, will have to comply, and it will kind of force them to take action as opposed to wait for a lawsuit. So there's another one about testing. So do you have any tips for usually testing with people who use assistive technology? That's a great question. We didn't go into testing, but suffice to say, the automated testing with the plugins like Lighthouse and Wave, that is like step number one. That is the most rudimentary step you have to do. Once you go over that and fix and those initial stages, you really need to test with screen readers at the minimum. Now, how do you do that, right? So if you have the resource, so like for example, Venngage, we have a QA team. The QA team is actually trained on both two types of the most common screen readers, which is NVDA and JAWS. And they actually use them to test. So if you have an in-house tester, you obviously can do that. If you don't have in-house testing, you can outsource the testing of you can outsource the testing to people who are what we call, they are essentially native users of AT. They're native screen reader users. They're not like our QAs, for example, are not native screen reader users. So there are companies that have a pool of people who are native screen reader users, and you tap into them and you can get them set. So we've used them before. If you want, we can, we can get in touch with you and give you some context. Granite, there's a question for you. Do you have any preferred site scanning tools for accessibility and SEO?
Thank you, Tom, for the question, and I'll use this to answer Adriana's question as well. The only platform that I think of that does SEO and accessibility, and they do it well, I think is Siteimprove. Some of the institutions that we work with, they're using Siteimprove. I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of their SEO software because, maybe because of my background as an SEO, I like this kind of like specialty tools, like where they kind of like have a very niche focus on just SEO or just accessibility. But Siteimprove is really great. Now, if you have the kind of like, if you're paying a lot of money, and I think usually you are for accessibility features, and then on top of that, you're also paying extra for SEO features. We recommended to our clients to kind of like keep a Siteimprove for accessibility because they had it kind of like embedded into their processes, but like, and then move them to SEMrush because it was way cheaper for them to use SEMrush, and they were getting more value for their money, more features, more data out of that. But if you have to use one platform and you want both SEO and accessibility, I think Siteimprove is the way to go. But my recommendation is, if you want the smarter decision, would be like keep Siteimprove for accessibility if you want or must, and then go to SEMrush for the SEO features at 1/10 of the price. Hope this answered your question, Adriana, as well. My experience is I look at their reports, I look at their data, I think it's solid, but then I look at the bill, and I don't feel comfortable telling the clients that they need to use that for SEO when they can get a much better deal with a tool like SEMrush.
Oh yeah, and I can see Nihal. Thank you for reminding me about the accessible flywheel, document flywheel. So this kind of addresses the question we talked about, like sort of related to the question of the lawsuit, where people, if you want to kind of shift your organizational processes from like a, from reactive to proactive. We wrote this whole guidebook on building an accessible document flywheel, and it can be applied to websites as well. Essentially, just to give you some context, a flywheel is this sort of mechanical wheel that it gains momentum as you spin it. And you then, once it gets spinning, you don't need to apply a lot of force. It kind of maintains the force and becomes self-sustaining, right? Which is the opposite of what accessibility is right now. Right now is always, you always have to apply force to let it keep going. It's always, it's not really scalable. It's always very high cost, very high effort. And so if you want to learn more about that, click on that link to find out how you can actually change that to a more accessible design and build this flywheel for your organization. Yeah, I think it looks like we're done with the questioning, and thank you very much for this session. It's been great, like great questions. Really appreciate all your time. We will send out the presentation, and again, follow us, both Brandon and me, on LinkedIn. And if you want to keep in touch, good luck with your sites, and get in touch if you need help, either on the design side or on the SEO side. All right, take care. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye.